welcome back here to the Pain and Panic podcast. I'm Adam Sheets, joined by Chris Reynolds, as always, here on the show as we continue to go through the NFL. The last two divisions we have to do, Chris, here of the AFC East and West. It's been a lot of fun going through all these divisions, understanding how much you hate Terry McLaurin, how much you love Kevin O'Connell and hate Andy Reid. We'll get into that today. But it's been a lot of fun here as we're getting ready to wrap things up here on our NFL previews here before the season gets going.
Yeah, I mean, every year I would do previews and rankings, and I'd have no way to express it. But I'm so happy we have this podcast now I can, and all that work is actually getting used. So I'm hoping that people are enjoying it, and now we can finish up I think, my favorite two divisions in the AFC.
Mm-hmm. I think they're probably the best. They're probably the most interesting, especially the AFC West. But we're, of course, going to start with the AFC East. And again, we're going to start with the big kahuna. It went from Tom Brady and the Patriots. Now the big kahuna lives in Buffalo. It's the Buffalo Bills coming off their best season of the Allen McDermott era, 13-4 last year. We had the second best record in the AFC, only behind the Kansas City Chiefs at 15-2. Josh Allen finally got his MVP after another fantastic season for the quarterback. But it ended the same way it always does for Buffalo. They lost in the playoffs to the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game. They did have a big playoff win this year, which is good. They beat the Ravens, but again, just they haven't been able to get over that hump with Kansas City. And again, I'll mention the stat we used with the Ravens because it goes here as well. No quarterback and coach combination has won a Super Bowl unless they've done it their first one in the first 5 years. This is year 8 of the McDermott-Allen era in Buffalo as well. Same era as the Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh. So, what do the Bills have to do to get over the hump? And I mean, they were closer than the Ravens last year. If you look, you talked about the drop pass in the divisional round, but the Bills were arguably one quarterback sneak away from moving on to the Super Bowl.
Well, don't get me started on the quarterback sneaks that they do. I hate it. I get that Josh Allen is big and strong, but I feel like he's also a very good quarterback, so let him actually try to throw the ball. Or, he's better when he runs, when it's supposed to be a pass and then something breaks out and he could run the ball. But anyways, to get past the Chiefs, they just need to just get over the mental hurdle. I think it's a mental thing for them because that loss in 2021, I believe, it was the start of 21 to 2022 then, when they lost in the 30 seconds left, the Chiefs scored. That was just so catastrophic.
13 seconds.
They have been unable to 13 seconds. They've been unable to get over that hurdle ever since. Last year was their best chance, probably. No, actually, no. 2 years ago, it was in Buffalo, and they still lost. Last year was in Arrowhead, but they still had a chance at the end, and they just can't get through it. I don't know what is the solution, but here's what I will say about Buffalo. Last year was supposed to be their little bit of retooling year, but they actually were so good that it ended up being a year for them to really compete. They signed Joey Bosa. They signed Greg Rousseau. I'm so bad with names. They have lots of edge help. They signed someone else's whose name I can't pronounce, Michael Hoyt. I can't pronounce one either, but they have Khalil Shakir, Joshua Palmer. Not amazing guys, but they're good on the fringes. They actually have some guys that can catch the football even better. Because last year they didn't really have a real receiving threat after losing Diggs. I don't really know where this team can improve that much, to be honest. They have a good offensive line, a good defensive line, an amazing quarterback, a good secondary and receivers. I don't know. I don't know what they're missing on paper.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. Their best chance was probably there. They had Kansas City and Buffalo. They would have had to go to Baltimore to beat the Ravens, so who knows what happens there. An interesting Lamar, Josh in a conference championship game with the winner to go to the Super Bowl. No Mahomes there would have been an interesting thing to see, but of course Kansas City won that. That was the year they were the 3 seed and ran through and went to the Super Bowl and beat the Niners. But yeah, you kind of look at this where they have a really good tight end room. Dalton Kincaid is really, really good. Joey Bosa is kind of it feels like they're just redoing the Von Miller and just hoping Joey Bosa is a little better than Von Miller was. I think that's kind of their hope.
Miller had a touchdown against the Ravens.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those where they're just kind of, it feels like, again, we talked about this with the Ravens, just kind of ramming your head into the wall and see how many times until it changes. That seems like what they're doing. It's almost copy and paste. like last year you mentioned they got rid of the receivers and they really relied on James Cook, who had a phenomenal year at running back. They have a really good offensive line. Josh Allen's really good, and they've really taken the ball out of Josh's hands, not completely, but a little bit more run-centric, play action, and things like that. It's a more quarterback-friendly system that's really worked out for Josh Allen, so it's good to see there for him, and I think it's the perfect scheme for his talent. He's got a big arm, but now kind of more focusing on the accuracy part of it, making the right plays instead of just trying to air it out, because that's when he would get caught and had the turnover problems early in his career. Plus, getting rid of Stephon Diggs, you're like, oh, that's a loss in the receiver room, but sometimes it's kind of like Stephon, he's a big personality, he wants the ball, maybe it helped, with the locker room and the offense kind of be more team-oriented. Not saying Stephon Diggs is an extremely selfish player, but he's a wide receiver one, and all wide receiver ones want the ball. So, it's kind of one of those situations, but again, I think it's the same thing as Baltimore, and it's eventually, if this doesn't work, I said Baltimore and Buffalo, you probably have one more year of kind of running this back, especially because the Chiefs are coming off one of their worst performances against Philadelphia in the Super Bowl. So you got one more chance, run it back. But if you don't do it, and let's say Mahomes ends up out of the AFC again in the Super Bowl, I think you got to make changes. Neither one of them's losing their quarterback, but I think it might be time. Again, I think Sean McDermott's a good coach. Maybe he goes somewhere else and see what he can do in another situation, and Josh Allen gets maybe an offensive coach instead of a defensive coach and see what happens. But yeah, I think they're in the same spot as Baltimore right now, where if not now, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I'd agree. I feel like this is now their best chance before they start to lose more people. And like I said, last year was retooling for this season. This is really their last real, I think, their best chance. Josh Allen's always going to keep you in it, but this is really when you're going to have all the people around him before the contract really kicks in. And he isn't getting paid even that much. He didn't ask for the most he could, but it's like you said, now or never. And they were close to getting rid of Sean McDermott, so they kept him. And they were winning a lot of games afterwards, but there was a time where they were going to change it. I think, like you said, this is probably the last year, or if they don't make at least the Super Bowl, I don't think they're going to run the same thing back.
Yeah, I think the time to get rid of Sean McDermott, if you were going to get rid of him, would have been immediately after that, what game? The Bengals game, when they lost to the Bengals at home in the snow. I think that was the one where it's like, this isn't Kansas City anymore. This is maybe a can't win it, so it's one of those. But now, of course, you just got to figure it out. And again, this is their year. If it's not this year, like, what's going to happen? Obviously, if injuries happen, things change. But if they're healthy, if everything goes right, and they get to the playoffs and they lose to Kansas City, again, it's just going to be you can't beat Andy Reid. It's time to make a change, and we'll see what they do there. But as you mentioned, they made some good additions. Gregory Rousseau was the name you were looking for there, but he's a good edge rusher. Joey Bosa is a guy, again, you're hoping maybe you can reignite some of the stuff we saw in LA early in his career, but it's going to be very interesting to see. And one thing, I think the division's getting better, but the one team in the division I don't think is getting better is the Miami Dolphins. They're 8-9 last year. They injury-riddled. Tua was not on the field, and I think the big question coming in for Miami this year, it's all about the head coach. It's Mike McDaniel. He made the weird comment in the press conference this week as we're recording. He's like, today's a great day because we're one day closer to death. And I'm like, okay, Mike McDaniel, attaboy, now we're getting very interesting. But is he kind of a dead man walking, no pun intended? Because ever since that great start they got to in 2023, they finished the year horrible. They ended up losing the division to Buffalo. They lost to Kansas City in that game where it was negative 25 degrees or whatever. And then last year was a disaster with all the injuries and Tua not being there. But, like, Mike McDaniel, it seems like he's losing the locker room a little bit. Like, is it maybe time that if it doesn't work out this year, maybe Mike McDaniel is going to be on his way out of Miami?
Yeah, I think he's a interesting, quirky guy, and I think after a few years without real success, I think that time might be coming to an end. However, he is a very good offensive coach, and I think he did. I'm not going to say he revolutionized the game because that'd be extremely exaggerating what he actually did, but he was one of the first guys to really put players in motion, all these receivers, Tyreek Hill in motion before the play starts. So when you actually snap the ball, Tyreek already has a head start, and we see that a lot more common now. Him and Sean McVay are very big guys that were doing that early on. And I think that looked great, and now you're seeing the same thing every year. Tyreek Hill's probably not going to get any faster or any better at football once he's in his later years. And Jalen Waddle, I think's very fun, but I don't think he actually has done much really last season. If you look at it, most of the time he's just running and doing cardio. So that hasn't really worked. Running back wise, they have A-Chain, and that's fine too. But Tua is also a huge injury question. I don't really know what the Dolphins are doing. They also trade away Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. They unretired Darren Waller to have him come play for them. They have Minka Fitzpatrick, but these all seem like lateral moves are slightly worse. And they have an older, expensive team now.
Yeah, I think it's weird where they're at. Like you mentioned, Tua is always going to be an injury risk, so I think it's kind of he's getting to the point where you got to expect him to get hurt at some point. You feel bad for him because these injuries are really bad and really dangerous, especially when it comes to concussions. But can't really rely on him. The big thing with Tyreek isn't him taking a step back. It's he doesn't really want to be there anymore. He made that very clear at the end of last season, and he's still there, and he's still not really meshing really well with the culture. So I think he's still kind of wanting out. I think we'll get into maybe if he's going to be a trade piece, around the deadline. But it's a really weird spot for Miami to be in. As you mentioned, McDaniel, he's a quirky guy, and I think we were talking in the last episode about the AFC North and the long tenured coaches. I think McDaniel, with the way he is and his personality, he's not a guy that can stay in a locker room for 10 years because that stuff's going to grow old quick, especially if success isn't there. And Miami hasn't won a playoff game since the year 2000.
Yeah, I think once you're talking about the success, and I don't even think it's totally his fault because some of the years they actually have a good team and Tua gets hurt. And I think it also is very hard to ask your team that's all about speed to go into Kansas City and win in a freezing cold game, where it was 20 degrees, whatever it was. So I think some of it's McDaniel I think he's a little strange. I just think the team isn't really built to really contend with the top teams either, which might be unfair to him. I think after the Tyreek Hill trade they went in, I think that failed. Now it's time to reboot, trade Tyreek if you could get much for him. I know he's an older receiver, but still, a lot of teams could use him. You're probably going to keep Waddle and Tua because you're younger and maybe your core pieces, but they do have some older guys. I think it's time to let them go. And their offensive line used to be really good, and that's when they were trying to get a quarterback like Tua they could protect, or Deshaun Watson at the time. Now they have the 25th ranked offensive line with a quarterback who, if he gets hit in the head again, might have to retire. So I don't think this team is really built to win. Their secondary, not much better. And they have a solid defensive line. I still think they have speed, which could maybe look great some games, but if it's not working, then they're going to look really bad some games as well.
Yeah, and Mike McDaniel, he comes from the Shanahan system, so he wants to run the ball, and the offensive line hasn't been there for them to run since Mostert left. Mostert had that big year when they got off to that fast start, and Tua's record when the temperature drops below 45 degrees is horrible, so I think that's a big concern, especially when you play in the AFC East, when every team's north outside of you. You're going to have to go to Buffalo every year, you're going to have to go to New England every year, you're going to have to go to the Meadowlands every year, so it's a really tough situation, and you kind of mentioned it. We'll probably talk about it if it still becomes prevalent as the season goes on, but the Tyreek Hill effect, if he wants out, still seems like he kind of does. And there's teams that are going to call about him. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas City wants a reunion. I wouldn't be surprised if Buffalo feels like they need that weapon on the outside if they try to go get him and bring in a wide receiver. I don't think they'd trade within division. I think that would become a big issue there with Buffalo, but again, it's these teams, and even on the NFC side, does a team maybe call in to try to get a guy like Tyreek Hill to take them over the top? So it's going to be really interesting to see how that all develops, and maybe if they can try to salvage that relationship.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I think this year they're probably going to finish the worst in the AFC East because I actually kind of like some of the other teams in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to get to the New York Jets now. Weird year, 5-12 last season. And no, Justin Fields is not a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers, but he might be a better fit for New York than, where they were. Because there was a lot of Aaron Rodgers friends. It was Devontae Adams. But now it looks like they're going back to the way they were with Zach Wilson type teams, which is it's defense oriented. Let's try not to turn the ball over. Let's try not to lose a game. Kind of like the Steelers had been. They have Aaron Glenn in there now. He's a defensive minded head coach coming over from the Detroit Lions. So it's a tough situation, really tough division, trying to regroup after this team's been decimated. They paid Sauce Gardner, they paid Garrett Wilson, and they're riding with Justin Fields here this season. Like, where do you see the Jets right now? Like, are they better? Are they worse than they were last year? Where are they at?
I think they're probably going to stay at the same third spot in the AFC East. I think the Patriots are going to jump them, but the Dolphins are going to fall back. They did lose a lot of people. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers. But Devontae Adams, who they traded for, they lost him after a brief stint there. Tyron Smith is gone. His son Reddick was gone. That didn't really work out for them. Solomon Thomas is gone. CJ Mosley is gone. And their defense used to be elite, and that used to mask the issues of a Zach Wilson. Actually, you couldn't even mask it. That was terrible. But the defense would keep you in games they would then lose. But now that defense is taking a step back. But I think offensively, Justin Fields, he played with Garrett Wilson. They had great success at Ohio State. I'm happy to see them two back together. I've always liked Justin Fields. I think having a running quarterback like that is just interesting, can make you more dynamic. And I think now they could probably hand the ball off to Breece Hall a little bit more. They kind of got away from that. But they should have a good run game with a good offensive line. Fields can run. And Garrett Wilson is one of the best receivers. They don't have much around him, but they do have him. And defensively, they still have a good secondary, not as much defensive line. So I would imagine they're in the same tier of 5 to 7 wins. I think they will still be very competitive. I just don't think you can compete with the Buffalo at all. But maybe there's a world where if things really go their way, they could try to fight for an AFC. But I think this is a really tough conference.
I think if you're trying to find a blueprint for this team being successful, I think you look at it and you say they need to be the Tennessee Titans with Tannehill. Don't turn the ball over. We're going to focus on the run. We're going to use Breece Hall, try to run the football, see what we can do there. Braylon Allen, my partner, is also there as well in the running back room. You trust the tight ends, you trust the receivers, and then you really rely on that defense. I think that's the blueprint. And hey, that was a defensive-minded head coach and Mike Vrabel with that Tennessee team, and maybe that's what they're going to try to do with Fields. Because I think Fields is a smart quarterback. He can run, so you can use the legs in the run game with the quarterback. I think he's accurate at times when he's on time. It's when he gets off time. He has a decent arm, but it's just a matter of putting it all together. But yeah, I mean, I like Justin Fields. He's played, like I said, the second best college football game from a quarterback I remember seeing in a playoff setting was him against Clemson when he broke his rib and came out in the COVID year and went nuts and was just throwing the ball all over the place, only behind CJ Stroud in the game he had against Georgia that they lost by 1.
I remember that game, Adam.
Yes.
Believe it or not, I was actually watching college football, and I remember that game.
Yeah, I just remember the funniest part, and again, this is the Penn State fan in me coming out a little bit, but it was kind of funny. I was rooting for Ohio State to win that game because I really wanted an Ohio State-Michigan national title, and we got Georgia TCU. But I remember watching it, and they missed the kick, and the ball hit the ground right as midnight hit, and it's just all. Poor Ohio State. I feel so bad for him in their national championship this year. Yeah, but I think he has big games in him. I think that first game is so entertaining. We talked about this when we were talking about Rodgers in Pittsburgh. That game, Jets versus Steelers to start the year, with Justin Fields' revenge game. I think everyone's talking about the Rodgers side of it, and no one's talking about the Fields side, which I think maybe the Jets locker room can use to kind of motivate him and see what happens. But that's a fun game to watch right out the gate. And as you mentioned, I think maybe the record's probably going to be better because they were a 7-8 win team with Zach Wilson, and now of course they fell to 5-12 with Aaron Rodgers, which is a weird thing to think about. But now maybe they can get back to that and trusting that defense. And again, as I said about the Jags, maybe a rookie coach head bump as well with Aaron Glenn.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and it is weird to think that they won less games with Aaron Rodgers, but I think that's because their defense, at least with the Zach Wilson, that was probably maybe the best defense in the NFL, or at least that top tier of teams. I think they're probably in the second tier of defenses now, but their defense used to literally win them games, which was remarkable considering Zach Wilson was their head coach, or not their head coach, was their starting quarterback. But yeah, I think they'll be better. I think this will be one of their best offenses they've had in a while, just because that bar is so low.
And I think the team did get worse last year a little bit after the defense, especially got worse after Saleh got fired, which makes sense. Saleh's a defensive head coach. Once he's gone, the defense got worse. So maybe Aaron Glenn could try to write him. He's a defensive head coach. But now we'll move on to the last team, the New England Patriots, who I think, judging by what you've said, I agree with you here. They're an interesting team. They got Mike Vrabel, who's a really good head coach that took the year off last year after being with Tennessee. Now back in New England, where he grew his roots as a player. Now you also look at Drake May in year 2. Drake May in limited action last year looked good. So where do you see the Patriots at this year? Because I think a lot of people are talking about them in high praise. They're in a really tough division, but there's a lot to like in New England.
There is a lot to like, and Mike Vrabel today was jumping. I was looking for the notification. He was jumping at a pile with his players. He was with Will Campbell. He was like physically pushing him to seeing what he feels like. He just seems like little bit like another quirky guy, but I think in the better sense than Mike McDaniel. But I really like Mike Vrabel. I think he was one of the best coaches when he was coaching for the Titans because he got the most out of those teams. Drake May, I think, actually looked pretty good despite the bad situation. I think they're the second best team in this division. I think last year they luckily lost some games that they probably shouldn't have, but that let them get now an offensive tackle with their 4th round pick. I think they should be a solid team. I still think they have a lot of issues on offense, but a better line and a very good defense.
Yeah, I mean, they drafted the tackle Will Campbell in the first round, which is big. I like the defense. I like Christian Gonzalez. I think he's a really good. He's been really quiet, but I think he's a really good young corner. He was drafted after Sauce Gardner, and I think Sauce got a lot of the attention. But Christian Gonzalez has been really good for New England when he's been on the field. I like Vrabel, as you mentioned. He's a really good coach. I think the difference between him and McDaniel, you mentioned quirky. The difference is Vrabel was a player. Like Vrabel played in the NFL, so I think a lot of those guys have that respect. It's like more like dudes being dudes in the locker room, and with McDaniel, wasn't a player, so it's kind of an outsider coming in and being quirky. It's just that little bit of a different voice there. But yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think the one nice thing about New England is they don't have a ton of expectations. Like you have people like us that are saying they're going to be, they're going to be better, and things like that. But I don't think anyone's going out saying, man, they have to go like 10-7. Like, they go 8-9, but you see immense improvement. You see Drake May playing well. You see this defense playing well. You see the vision on the way they're going. I think a lot of people will be excited about this. And I think that's what makes this team so fun going into this year, especially a division where we mentioned we think Miami might take a step back. Who knows what the Jets are going to be with Justin Fields, and maybe they could sneak into that second spot behind Buffalo.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And I think Mike Vrabel, as you said, the respect is there, and he was a Patriot, so I think the fans will like that a lot more. And it was hard to replace Belichick, so I like that there was a gap between Vrabel and Belichick. So now there's a clear, Belichick, terrible losing. Now Vrabel, they can kind of build again. And Stephon Diggs, who was good last year when he played, he got a big contract, so maybe you get Drake May with the real receiver one if Diggs is still at that level. I know he had an interesting offseason, having some fun, but I think if he's right, then you have at least one person for Drake May to throw to, but he was really good as a scrambler last year, which was a little surprising for him coming out of the draft, but I think he showed a decent bit to actually give you hope that he could win, 8 games.
Yeah, TMZ, never where you want to see your wide receivers. Stephon Diggs, had a solid good week on TMZ this offseason. But yeah, and I think the one thing, if you're the Patriots, you're looking in the division. Stephon Diggs helped really ignite Josh Allen's career when he started out young. They brought him in. Now, Stephon Diggs is not the player he was when he came into Buffalo as he is now coming into New England. But, if he can just give them that weapon, and then they have a good tight end room, they have a good running back room with Ramondre Stevenson. They have the offensive line's getting better. Drake May can move a little bit. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of nice things to look at here with New England. You kind of alluded to how you're ranking these teams, but, playoff situation now. They have one team in last year. It was the Bills. Do you think maybe New England sneaks in, or are you still sticking with just the Bills as the representative here in the AFC?
I'm sticking with just the Bills. I'm not going to go all in, on the Patriots yet. They still don't have a lot on offense besides Stephon Diggs. And I think Drake May, that's difficult to ask a quarterback to create with you don't have a lot around him. But I think next year, they're probably going to get some more pieces, maybe draft some more talent. And I also think we're going to get to, I think, the best division in the whole conference. But it's very hard to have two teams from division make it when this conference has so much depth at the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of interesting teams. I'm with you. I'm just going Buffalo. Now, there is the chance that, maybe there's injuries at other teams and New England sneaks in, because I said I think New England's going to be good. You never know how the schedule breaks down. They are playing a last-place schedule in the AFC East, so that does give them a little bit of hope. But, yeah, I'm with you. I just think it's going to be Buffalo this year. I think the Buffalo is going to have a good season, and as we kind of talked about, if not now, when for the Bills? And it seems like, the clock's ticking as we head into 2025. Now we'll move into, as you said, you might think the best division here in the NFL, and that's the AFC West. And we're going to start with the team that nearly went undefeated last year, the Kansas City Chiefs, 15-2 as they were trying to three-peat, become the first ever team to three-peat. They got off to a great start. They made their way through the playoffs, even though they did not play well at times. They kind of struggled throughout the regular season, but they kept winning games, and they got to the Super Bowl, and the Eagles just, exposed them and exposed that offensive line. But are the Chiefs, is this just going to be another year where the Chiefs, just figure it out and they just go through the season and they end up winning? Or are they in trouble, and do you think maybe the stuff we saw last season maybe rears its head again?
I'm known for mainly just picking the Chiefs to make the Super Bowl every year, but this is going to be one of the few times I can remember not picking the Chiefs to make it, just because I think the Eagles released the blueprint of how to beat the Chiefs. I think they honestly didn't really improve this offseason. They lost Joe Thuney. They re-signed some of their offensive linemen, but they didn't really bring anyone new and better in. They did draft a tackle with their 32nd pick, but it's not like That's not like a crazy top pick. You know what I mean?
Hey, I'll say
Um,
something here. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Josh Simmons, a lot of people say, would have been the first tackle taken in the draft, but there was injury concerns from him out of Ohio State. So that was the only thing there.
well, if he gets injured, then that's a waste of a pick for them because they're going to have a bad offensive line. And last year, I mean, partially they win because they have Patrick Mahomes. They're a very good team late in games. I also think part of it's just luck really went their way. And I think they're the opposite of the Bengals season now. Just me or the law of the mean or whatever it is you're going to regress back towards that middle ground of what you probably should be. And last year they basically won every close game. So I think you're probably going to see them still, one of the best teams in the conference, but I don't think they can replicate a 15-2 record. However, I will say Travis Kelce might have his best season that he's had in a while because Travis Kelce's probably done at the end of the year. After losing the Super Bowl, he had a long break trying to decide whether or not he wants to stay. I just think you don't want to end with that terrible taste in your mouth of getting destroyed in the Super Bowl, which he and the Chiefs were. But now, say it's your not last season, or maybe he knows it in his head. Give everything he's got because last year it seems like he didn't really have anything left. But get everything out now. Know it's gonna be your last season while you're playing. Appreciate it, and then he's probably gone. So I think you're gonna see a great effort from him this year. I think you still have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, which is very good just to get you to a lot of wins and make the playoffs at the very least. Just probably not the number one seed like they were last year, where I cannot emphasize how many close games they won. It was literally almost every single week.
I think a lot of people forget how injured this team was last year. Like Hollywood Brown didn't play a lot of the season. Rasheed Rice was out for the year after the second game. Xavier Worthy was your number one receiver as a rookie, and there were a lot of questions about him coming in. Travis Kelce had probably his worst year in years for them. I think they're going to be a lot better, especially offensively this season. I think I point back to the last time Patrick Mahomes got embarrassed and truly played bad was 2021 in the AFC Championship game. Had the horrible second half against Cincinnati, and they lost the game, and it was just really, really bad. And, there were a lot of questions about them. They ended up actually getting rid of Tyreek Hill after that game. And what Patrick Mahomes do? He came back. He led the league in passing yards and touchdowns, and he won MVP, and they won the Super Bowl, and he won Super Bowl MVP. So, I just think, when you motivate this guy, I think sometimes it does get a little stale, and now that they have that little pushback after losing, sometimes that can change a man. And I think Patrick Mahomes, I've said on record, I think he's the most talented quarterback that's ever played in the NFL. I truly believe that. I truly think he has the opportunity to retire as the greatest quarterback of all time. He's still got a long way to go there, but I think he has the potential to do so. So I think they're going to be really good. I like Josh Simmons. I don't know where you're getting off. If you watch the camp tape, you watch him at Ohio State, the dude's a beast as an offensive tackle. They actually brought in Trent Williams backup from San Francisco that Kyle Shanahan always talked really highly of. They don't even have to play him at tackle. They're moving him into guard. They still have Creed Humphrey at center, who's a really good center for them. Jawan Taylor, we'll see how he does on the other side for the tackles, but I think they improve that offensive line. And then I think the defense could be really good. George Karlaftis, Chris Jones. I think they still have a lot of young guys that are continuing to move up. I really like this team going into this year, and plus they have the best coach in the league and the best quarterback in the league. So I think that's a great combination to have going into every year.
I'll give you a better example of the Chiefs being embarrassed in the Super Bowl. It was against the Bucks in that 2020 COVID year, and the year after that is when they lost to the Bengals, like you said. So I don't think you're looking at what happened after the Bengals. I think you should look about what happened after the Bucks, where then they lost again the next year. So I think there are years when they lose, and then they lose.
So they went nuts that year, though. Their offense was great, and they just lost in the AFC Championship game.
But I'm saying after they lost in the Super Bowl, they lost, and Mahomes had that bad game against the Bengals. So I don't think it's a given that after getting embarrassed in the Super Bowl that the team will bounce back. I do agree they did have some injuries, but I don't have an issue with the pick of the offensive tackle. I'm saying if they're drafting a guy with injury concerns, there's a reason why there's injury concerns. So if he does get injured, then you don't get to use that pick.
The injury concerns was they didn't know if he'd be ready for this season, but he was. So I think it's more of if you would have told the Patriots that Josh Simmons was going to be ready come training camp, I think they would have said, we might have took him. I think there's a lot of teams that we would have took him if we knew he was going to be ready at training camp. The Chiefs ended up stealing him at 32, and now, of course, now you're sitting there looking like, man, now that he's ready, he looks really good in camp. He's socking one of his teammates. I love a good camp fight. He's throwing right hooks. I like that. There was no fear. I'll tell you, if you haven't seen that punch, go watch that punch, everybody. My goodness, dude's got some strength. I'm hyping up a Buckeye here. I'm showing my impartiality, even though I normally end up really liking Ohio State players once they get to the NFL after they get out of college. So it's usually how it works. But no, I like this team. I think they have a good team. And again, like I said, you have best quarterback, best coach. They're going to be fine. They'll be able to settle any strip they need to. And now we'll move on to the Los Angeles Chargers, 11-6 last year, but you want to talk about disappointing. That playoff game against Houston was a nightmare for LA as they lost. Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions in that game. So what does he need to do? Because, I'll go with me later, but, what do you think Justin Herbert needs to do here? Because it's been a interesting start to his career, and now they're going into year 2 under Harbaugh.
Yeah, I think they just get to the playoffs and they just try to change things. And I think they should just stick to the formula that got them to the playoffs. Last year, I think partially was some injuries with their running backs. And I think Gus Edwards kind of flopped. J.K. Dobbins was good, but once again got a little dinged up towards the end of the season. So you go to passing the ball again. But that team doesn't really have a lot of great options to throw to besides Ladd McConkey. Now this year they re-signed Keenan Allen, but who knows how much he actually has left in the tank because he was very disappointing on the Bears last season. So I think stick to the run game. They lost J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I think they are kind of okay with that. But they did sign Najee Harris. They drafted Marion Hampton. So they're clearly going into this offensive line in this run game. That's Harbaugh's system. And I think Herbert now, in year 2 with Harbaugh, they actually have a better system that really fits their team more so. I think they're going to be better than last year. It's just a matter of the playoffs, not throwing the ball when you're winning. We saw that against the Jags. When they blew that huge lead they had, they just choked that one away. I think you just have to have one game where you just stick your style, and then you're more comfortable there. But it seems like Herbert can't really figure it out in the playoffs, which is kind of disappointing because Herbert is one of the best quarterbacks when he first came into the league. And it seems like he's kind of stalled and kind of been asked to do less and less. So statistically, he's not even at that level he used to be.
I am probably one of the most anti-Herbert people that you'll find. I think he's been by far the most overrated quarterback maybe in the history of the NFL. There's people that put him in the top 5 of quarterbacks in the league, and I can't imagine any other time in the history of the league that you have a guy who's entering, he came in the same draft class as Joe Burrow, came in the same draft class as Jalen Hurts, and we would put him in the top 5 even though he's never won a playoff game. He blew the game against the Jags, and then the last game he played, which is the one I try to get to, they played the Texans, who we mentioned. The Texans were begging for someone to beat them last year. They just, CJ was sick and tired of getting hit. They just really didn't want to. He didn't want to be playing anymore. And and the Texans blew him out. And Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions. So it's just I don't see it with Herbert yet. The talent's there. I see the ball come out of his arms. He has a great arm. It's just eventually before people start anointing him as this great quarterback, and every year saying he's top 5 in the league. It's let's see him do something before we just say yep, top 5 quarterback in the league. Because there's people that rank him ahead of Jalen Hurts, and I'm sitting there Jalen Hurts has been to 2 Super Bowls. He's outplayed Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl. He's won Super Bowl MVP. He would have won MVP if he didn't get hurt in the year they lost in the Super Bowl. So it's one of those situations where people just overrate him. Maybe it's more me not hating Justin Herbert as much as me hating people that talk about Justin Herbert. But yeah, it's time to do things. I like Harbaugh. I think Jim Harbaugh is a really good coach. I think their system's good. They had the number 1 scoring defense in the league last year. I think it's going to be good again this year because that's just the way Harbaugh is. So the team's going to be good, but again, it's going to be up to once they get to the playoffs, is the moment too big for Justin Herbert, which, you could argue it's been the last 2 times he's been there.
Well, I'll defend him in the sense of I do think he's better than Jalen Hurts. I think you could say Jalen's had a better career. I think that's true. But if you were to give me a team right now who to start with, I'd take Justin Herbert over Jalen Hurts. I think that's fair. And I do know what you mean where the talent probably does significantly, outweigh the actual success that he's had. But in the beginning, it was great because he came in with no moment's notice. Tyrod Taylor got his lung punctured by the team doctor, and Herbert comes in and plays amazing against the Chiefs in his first game with only 15 minutes to prep. And I think that whole season was tremendous. I do think, though, after that, there was a lot of pressure, and I think he throws the ball great and is very accurate at times, but he just sometimes gets the big games, things don't go his way, and he makes some bad plays. I'm with you, and he's underperformed in terms of success. I, though, still think I'd probably take him ahead of Jalen Hurts, but I think he's probably the 6th to 8th best quarterback. I think he's definitely in the same tier as Jalen. And I'm not going to fight you about Jalen Hurts being a spot higher, but I think, there's a clear top 4 in my mind of Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and I think Joe Burrow has to be there just based on how well he's played. And then after that, 4 is probably the next tier of guys. That's where Justin Herbert would probably go for me.
Yeah, I think he's I think he's maybe the 10th quarterback, maybe ninth. Because like I look at it, I'm like, what makes him better than Matthew Stafford? Like what makes Justin Herbert better than Matthew Stafford? Like there's not much there. There's not many arguments for him to be better than Matthew Stafford. Like I just watched him play C.J. Stroud, and Stroud had a bad year. Like and Stroud beat him. I mean, and then like we look at a guy like again, you don't overreact after 1 year, but Jaden Daniels. I mean, like you look at the way he played that first season. So like if he continues to take that step, like I'd put him ahead of him. I just think the people that it's more the people that just automatically say he's the fifth best quarterback, or some people might have him ahead of Joe Burrow at times, and it's just like okay, like the talent's there, but like most quarterbacks, it's like let's see you do it before we just anoint you in the top echelon of quarterbacks. So we'll see. But like I said, I like Harbaugh. I like that system. Normally, the team continues to get better as long as the team sticks around. I like Amari Hampton. The dude's a beast out of North Carolina, and I think they're gonna have a good year. And like I said, it's one of those where Justin Herbert, it's maybe the like he's not James Harden, but below James Harden, we're like, okay, he's going to have good stats in the regular season. Get me to the playoffs, and then we'll judge what Justin Herbert's going to be. So maybe it's just one of those situations. And I think a lot of people have that idea, and I think people that support him think he's going to step up, and I'm just a little more, let's see it before it happens.
I think that's fair, and I though do really like this Chargers team, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it is. I think it's fair to judge him when it comes to the playoffs to deal with your real playoff success. But when it comes to the regular season, I still think the Chargers are probably a lock, considering how good that team is, how good Harbaugh is, and that team overall is very
Mm-hmm.
talented.
Yeah, I think they're going to be really good. Now we'll move on to another team that kind of surprised people last year. It's the Denver Broncos. I think a lot of people were kind of down, a little surprised with the Bo Nix pick initially when it was made, but pairing him up with Sean Payton, they went 10-7 last year. They had a great finish to the year. They were able to make the playoffs. They made that Bills game interesting in the playoffs on the road. They were in a really tough spot, obviously being the 7 seed, having to play the 2 seed on the road in Buffalo. They had the quick touchdown early, but they just couldn't consistently move the ball. So can Bo Nix and Sean Payton, because kind of a lot of people say Nix reminds you a little bit of a younger Drew Brees. Maybe that's why Sean Payton sees in him and hopes that's maybe what he can replicate in Denver. But like, can they replicate that success, and can Bo Nix take a step, or are they in for maybe a take a step back after the surprising start? Their defense is loaded, though.
Well, I do think though that this Broncos team is phenomenal. I think they are great in all the right spots. And Bo Nix, I think, had a very good season last year, and I think what's different for him, where I'm not super worried about this sophomore slump, is I don't really think it was Bo Nix lighting things up, for the team. I think it was a good overall team play, and then he started to figure things out towards the end of the season. So I don't think it's like Jaden Daniels, who was literally putting the team on his back, could see some regression. I think Bo Nix should probably, if anything, get better, because Sean Payton does have a very distinct style and system to things. I think he'll get better. I think Sean Payton is a great coach, and I think that he has his guy. I will not say I don't think he's anything close to Drew Brees. I know that's not what you meant, but you said stylistically they're similar. I think there's a big gap there just with how accurate Drew Brees was. I will say, though, that with Bo Nix, he's probably more mobile, and I think in the short game, he's still very competent. And I think they have a very good team. They've one of the best offensive lines, a top 10 defensive line, and one of the best secondaries in the league, with reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Patrick Surtain, who's a corner, which is incredibly rare for a corner to win recently, because it's usually just edge rushers. So I'm going all in on this team. I'm going to spoil it now. They're my pick to win the division year 2 with a quarterback and this head coach combo.
Yeah, I don't have them win the division, but yeah, I think they're going to be good. I think Surtain's unbelievable. He's a crazy good corner. I will say, hey, Bo Nix had a better rookie year than Drew Brees had. Yeah, I just say that.
I think it's a different era in the NFL nowadays.
Well, I don't
even
know if Drew Brees played as a rookie. He was a second round pick, so he might have not even played. But
he probably not even played his rookie season. But he was also in
yeah.
the Chargers. They had like Eli, and the Phillip Rivers thing was all complicated.
Yeah. Drew got drafted in 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. Never beat Penn State in college. Just like I always like to throw that out there when I talk about Drew Brees. Never beat Penn State. LeVar Arrington never lost.
That's why he's
to him.
my favorite. He never beat my team, and when he was actually at my NFL team, he won a lot of games and a Super Bowl.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, but no, I wasn't saying he is Drew Brees. It was just more the stylistically, he gets the ball out quick, undersized quarterback. I think that's maybe Sean Payton sees little things in there of a Drew Brees type quarterback, and I think that's what he's hoping maybe Bo Nix could potentially become for the Broncos. Yeah, but I think they have a good team. That defense, as we were talking about, they're special. They have a special group, and it's just a matter of the receivers concern me. They don't have a lot of weapons. Marvin Mims had a good year. They have Cortland Sutton, but they don't have a ton of weapons for Bo Nix out there. So I think that would be one concern for them offensively, especially with, a second-year quarterback. Again, we talked about this with Jaden, more tape on you. Teams can scout more for Bo Nix now, kind of knows what he likes, what he doesn't like to do, kind of try to counteract that. So we'll see how it goes. But, the Broncos have high hopes for this year. And another team that finished last place in the AFC West, the Las Vegas Raiders, 4-13 last year, but they've changed a lot in the year. They've decided to add Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll coming out of retirement to coach the Las Vegas Raiders. He brings Geno Smith over from Seattle as well. So, Pete Carroll, he's one of the best coaches in recent NFL history, with what he did in Seattle. So what can we expect from Pete Carroll in Vegas, which you kind of feel bad because Carroll's a good coach, but at the same time, he might have inherited the toughest job in the league because he's taken over a Raiders team that isn't overly talented, and he's in maybe the toughest division.
I actually, though, think that this isn't that bad of a situation. You do have some fun, exciting things, some new things for this team. Offensively, as you said, Geno Smith, Pete Carroll, that worked. You have Ashton Genty. We know Pete Carroll likes to run the ball. Now he gets one of the top running back prospects that we've ever had. Receiving wise, they do have Brock Bowers, who's a generational tight end who had the greatest rookie season for a tight end. And Jacoby Myers may not be the best wide receiver one, but he can actually catch a football, which is, solid. It's my guy right there, Jacoby Myers. I think the main issue for them is just defensively. They really don't have, they have the worst ranked secondary, and they just lost both of their defensive tackles. One of them, they kind of just claimed he was supposed to have guaranteed money. They let him go. It was a whole complicated thing. I'm not sure how that's going to end, but still a very good player. They leave. They traded away their other defensive tackle, so that's going to take a hit as well. So defensively, they don't have much, but I think they can try to form a semblance of a younger offensive team that has somewhat of a core there, and maybe Pete Carroll's the bridge to this next coach that they're going to get afterwards.
Yeah, I think Geno is a good quarterback for this situation because I think Geno's the perfect settle things, get you to the middle. Like, Geno's not going to, I don't think, elevate teams, but he's real good at, okay, we're going to get, we're really bad at this. I'm going to be accurate. Brock Bowers going to get the ball on time. If Jacoby Myers is open, he's going to get the ball on time. I'm not going to, tight window throws, not something Geno Smith, elite at, but, just kind of getting you that spot, especially in a run-first offense, which I'm expecting them to be with Genty. Only thing that concerns me with Genty is a little bit of the Penn State game. He wasn't great. That was one of the first true elite defenses that he played against. And he had a lot of carries last year, so you wonder how long that prime can be. He's getting hit a lot, so how long can he go into the NFL is obviously a concern with any running back. They do it with NFL running backs too after they, like we talked about Saquon getting 400 touches, and then it's like, oh, you can't do that again, or then there's going to be issues. So in turn, I think they're going to run him into the ground right away because I don't think they're going to waste a lot of time with Genty, but we'll see what they do there. But I think the situation's not bad, as you said. If you just looked at the Raiders situation, I think the situation turns in, then you have to immediately compete with the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Chiefs. I think that's where you got to play them. That's 6 of your 17 games are against teams that we think are playoff caliber and sometimes Super Bowl caliber.
Yeah, I do agree. It's probably the worst division to be in. I think with Genty, I'm not super concerned about the Penn State game because he was on such a terrible passing offensive team that you saw Penn State completely selling out just to stop the run. Mm-hmm. And Genty, I was watching that game, obviously I'm rooting for Penn State, but you're petrified of the guy. And every time he'd break 2 tackles, the issue is Penn State would have 5 guys there to tackle him because they were just trying to stop the run. So he still put up a valiant effort. I do, he did. I think he fumbled it twice, but still, he's a very good running back. And I think the touches is somewhat of a real concern, but he's still very young, so I'm not worried about that yet. And I would say now that he's on an NFL team that actually has somewhat of a passing game with Brock Bowers, and I think they can actually support him more than he was in college.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I think it's just, there's reason to be concerned, especially in, like I said, in the division. When we said the Broncos defense is loaded, the Chargers defense loaded, he's going to play some really good defenses, and we'll see how good that offensive line is. It's not all Genty, they're going to have to block for him. I did see the one thing is the running backs coach, I think it was Chip Kelly's the offensive coordinator there now, they were talking about changing Genty's stance, which had a lot of people upset about because Genty does the whole, he just stands straight up in the backfield instead of getting down in an athletic stance before the play starts, and I don't think the Raiders like that very much, so we'll see if they actually end up changing that. They'll have their first preseason game coming up. But Chris, you kind of alluded to how many teams you're going to have in this. They had 3 last year. It was the Chargers, Broncos, and Chiefs. Do you think that ends up being the same 3 this year? Do you think maybe one less comes? I know by process of elimination, you do have 3 teams in.
So I have 3 teams from this division making it in. I have the Broncos first, I have the Chargers second, and the Chiefs third. I think the Chiefs just slide in the regular season, but I think they're going to have a good postseason. I think I'd probably trust them more than the Broncos in the postseason. But for the regular season, I think they're probably going to send it in a little bit. I do think they're going to come out with some vengeance based on how last season ended for them, but they are an older team, and I think they might. And last year, they were just so lucky with the close game. So I do think they fall back a little bit. I think the Chargers have about the same season. I think the Broncos really elevate.
I've got 2 teams. I'm going with the Chiefs and Chargers. I don't see the Broncos taking that step only because, like I said, the offensive weapons concern me. I don't know if Bo Nix is truly that guy that's going to be able to take that leap in year 2. He was a veteran quarterback. I think the one thing he played, I think he was up there with like some of the most college games played. Like he played a college game at Auburn against Justin Herbert like 6 years ago. Like, it's like crazy how long he was in college. He was pro ready coming in, which I think helped him get off to the good start. But I don't know how much of like a ceiling a guy like Bo Nix has in the NFL. We'll see. So I think maybe they take a slight step back. I think they'll be good. I just think maybe they miss the playoffs. And the Chiefs in charge. I have the Chiefs winning the division. I'm not betting against, like I said, best coach in the division, best quarterback in the division. Not going to bet against those guys. So that's going to bring us into our AFC predictions. So I have the Ravens, Chiefs, Bills, Chargers, Texans, Jags, and Bengals. And Chris, you have Ravens, Bills, Chargers, Broncos, Chiefs, Bengals, Texans. So, like, how confident are you in those teams? And I think both of our lists, I mean, the AFC, I think the one thing they have over the NFC is they're a lot deeper than the NFC is.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have the same list except for you have the Jags, and in their place I have the Broncos. But we have the 6 of the same 7. I'm pretty confident in the Ravens, Bills, I think are 2 locks to at least make the playoffs. And then beyond that, because the AFC West is so competitive, it's kind of hard to tell. But I'm very certain in those 2. The rest I'm not sure about the order of the whole AFC West, but I'm sure that at least 2 teams from there will make it. And the AFC South, Adam, I have no idea. So I'm not super confident in the AFC just because there is a lot of movement there compared to the NFC, where it's clearly more like some teams at the top and the other teams are a lot lower.
Yeah, my biggest concern in the South, kind of mentioned it, is like I have the Texans and the Jags, but like I'm not wishing this on them, but like it would not surprise me with how bad that offensive line is. Like CJ Stroud could miss a game, like he could get banged up just because he's taken so many hits. Trevor's been banged up the last few years, so he could miss games. So I think that's kind of the big thing in that division is the health of the quarterbacks. And then maybe Anthony Richardson takes a leap. Who knows? Maybe Cam Ward is the greatest quarterback prospect we've ever seen in our lives. Maybe he comes out as the greatest season in the history of football. Who knows? In the AFC South, anything can happen.
True.
That's going to bring us into our AFC Championship predictions. Chris, who do you have in the AFC Championship game, and who is representing the AFC in the Super Bowl?
I'm gonna buy into this team. It feels like they are cursed and they will never do it. But I have the Bills winning in the AFC, and I have them beating the Broncos. I'm really into the Broncos this year. I think they also have a real home field advantage in the altitude, in that weather. The Bills also obviously known for their home field. So I think it's those 2 teams matching up. I have the Broncos coming out, or not the Broncos. I have the Bills beating the Broncos in that game. And I think in the NFC, I had the Eagles beating the Niners. So
yes,
I think that's going to be, or no, I forget who I had in the NFC.
No,
I did.
You had the Eagles beating
the
Niners.
So I had the Eagles.
I said, how chalky.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I have the Bills versus the Eagles. And I'm just going to go with the Bills. I'm going to believe in that team. I think it's very unlikely given history, but I think it's the time. I think they have the best quarterback in the NFL, and they have the most talent they're going to have around him.
Yeah, I think, you're going against history. We threw out that stat in these podcasts that, no quarterback coach combination has won a Super Bowl unless they win it in their first 5 years in the history of the NFL. And you're saying McDermott and Allen get it done. But I'm with you, if not now, when for the Bills? Like, if it's not going to be this year with that crew, it's not going to happen, and they're going to have to make changes. So I don't disagree with you there. I got the Chiefs winning the AFC. I'm not betting against them yet. I think, again, I think this is a big year for them. I think they're going to bounce back. I have them beating the Bengals. I think the Bengals are the team that I said, if they get in the playoffs, they're ending up in the AFC Championship game because I think Joe Burrow and that team, they just figure it out when it comes to the playoffs. Like every year they've been there. They were 10-7 the one year and made the run all the way to the year they went to the Super Bowl. I think they won the division. They had to win in Tennessee, and then they won in Arrowhead. They lost in the AFC Championship game the last time they were there, so I think they find their way back to the AFC Championship game, and I think the Chiefs end up beating them there. And then I had the Bucks beating the Eagles in the NFC Championship. Remember, went out on the limb and said the Bucks. So you have the Broncos, I have the Bucks as our interesting teams to make steps, and I have the Chiefs defeating the Bucks in the Super Bowl. I have Kansas City getting back on track, and I think we might look back and say this is the greatest 4-year run in the history of football. And if they went to 4 straight Super Bowls, the Bills are the only team that's done it, and if the Chiefs go to 4 straight and win 3 of 4, obviously it would be the greatest stretch in football. So I have the Chiefs getting back to the Super Bowl and getting the job done.
Yeah, I think I was maybe a little bit more risky in the AFC compared to you, but you were more risky in the NFC. It's really hard to really pick against Mahomes and the Chiefs, but I think I can finally do it this year just in the nature of how badly they lost last year, and that really did expose some concerns. But you did make some good points. They're due for some injury luck to go their way, but they're also older. I mean, the guys you listed, Hollywood Brown's usually hurt. You know, that's not like a crazy thing for them to happen. Kelsey's been very healthy his whole career, so I think that's been a blessing. And Mahomes hasn't had an injury in a while either, so I feel like I'm just jinxing everyone. I'll knock on some wood over here. But if they are healthy, then I think, I mean, it's hard not to imagine a world where the Chiefs are not in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's the one thing that, you know, if you're trying to find the comparisons, Mahomes has the 3 Super Bowls, Brady won the 3 quick, so we are on the track of this is when Mahomes misses the entire season and he gets hurt, and it'd be weird because they play their first game in Brazil, so he could get hurt there, and then they could say, well, that was real fluky, they had to play in Rio de Janeiro, and then, you know, they have a tough start to the year. You're going to learn a lot about them quick. They play the Chargers in Brazil and then come back and play the Eagles in the Super Bowl rematch in Arrowhead, so, we're going to find out a lot quick about the Chiefs right away.
I'm letting you know right now, I will not put any stock in what happens in that Brazil game. Last year, they were playing on a slip and slide, I'm pretty sure. Saquon did have 3 touchdowns, but every single time they went to throw the football on that field, someone was falling. I think, who got hurt that game? Was it Jordan Love got hurt that game at the end?
Jordan Love, yeah. Yeah.
Just because, and Saquon, to start the game, fell, and people were freaking out because they just got him. And then you realize halfway through that everyone is slipping all over the field. So I hope they improve that. I'm not really good, though. It's prime for an overreaction because it's week 1 and it's also in a different country on a different field that I'm sure is probably not going to be the same that they're used to.
And it's
just
a standalone
out there
game.
Now.
Everyone's going to be watching. It's a standalone game Friday night. Yeah, but it's gonna be fun. Hey, and I'm just starting the trend. Whoever wins the game in Brazil to start the year wins the Super Bowl. It'd be back-to-back years. That's my prediction. The Chiefs beat the Chargers and win the Super Bowl. If Justin Herbert gets the job done, we can come on this podcast the next week, and I would say Justin Herbert's the greatest quarterback of all time, and I'd say they're winning the Super Bowl. I'd change it all up if they win in Rio de Janeiro. But that's gonna do it here for the rest of this podcast. It's been a lot of fun going through all these divisions. Now, we're doing this really early. Again, we're recording this on August 6th, so, you know, a lot could change. We don't have any preseason games outside of the Hall of Fame game where, you know, Trey Lance looked really good, so, you know, if Justin Herbert has an injury problem, Trey Lance can come in and play. So we don't really know much, so just trying to preface that out there. If we're completely wrong, don't blame us. It's just because we did it so early, right, Chris?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of the case that we're recording ahead of time, but makes it a lot easier for us with our schedules, and knowing us and our luck so far, I am sure we're going to have major developments and trades happen right before we release the podcast, and we're just going to seem like we completely ignored something. But hopefully keep that in mind. Hope you guys enjoyed the NFL season previews that we've done on these. I've loved these division previews. Happy to put my work to good use and love these conversations, Adam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just can't wait for us to come back and all these predictions be done, and we find out Micah Parsons is on the Chargers, and Terry McLaurin is on the Bills, and Trey Hendrickson is playing for the Chiefs, and, you know, it'd be like, oh yeah, a lot of things are different now than they were when we did these predictions on August 6th.
Probably should have started the podcast with somewhat of a warning, but it's okay. It's more fun this way, just to think that we completely missed the fact that the Chiefs traded Mahomes, you know, if that happens.
Yeah. They do the Luka trade. You know, they trade Mahomes for who would be
the Luka trade happens.
He's an injury prone, like 35-year-old quarterback that's good but not great.
Stafford for Patrick Mahomes.
Stafford for Mahomes would be interesting. Oh, yeah, that'd be funny.
Stafford for
Um,
Jaden Daniels, maybe.
yeah, yeah, that's just there's a lot of crazy trades that could happen. Oh yeah, but it's been a lot of fun here, going through all these picks. So please subscribe to all of our social medias at the Pain and Panic Podcast, so you can stay up to date on all our shorts when we post live here on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts here. So it's been a lot of fun. Chris, you got anything to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, stay tuned for our next episode. We should be publishing our uploads every either Sunday night or Monday morning, probably on Mondays and on Fridays as well. Mondays will probably be more recaps, Fridays more previews.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe our next episode is going to include some fantasy football stuff, which I love doing. I also do a lot of prep for fantasy football that no one would ever use but me, but now I actually have a reason to use it. So I'm also happy about that.
What is your record like in winning your league in fantasy football? Because I know you do an insane amount of prep. Like, does it actually work? Like, or are we just, you're doing all the prep?
All right, if Joe Tuman's listening, he's going to say I'm very bad in our Dynasty League. To be fair, I was added to this league after the draft because someone bailed out, okay? So I'm not counting that league. Last year, in my 2 non-Dynasty leagues, I won one of the 2, and then my Dynasty League, I won. So I won 2 out of those 3 leagues I did last year.
There you go. That's a great percentage. So I just want to make sure you were getting return on investment. You were putting all this work in and it was coming back out. I want to make sure you were treating yourself right.
Yeah. I won 2 or 3 last year, but I usually do more leagues and I usually might win one. But last year was probably one of my best seasons.
There you go. See, that's what we love to hear. So Chris is an expert. So when we get to our fantasy football pod, you have an expert that's going to be talking to you about who to draft and who not to draft, even though probably when it's posted, some of you guys will be doing our draft. I know some people are doing drafts and this week I've heard people say they were doing drafts. I'm like, a little early to be drafting, guys, but okay. That's going to do it here for our NFL division and playoff previews. Here, when we come back, as Chris mentioned, we'll have fantasy football stuff, and then we'll be all set for the NFL and college football season. As football season is upon us here as we move through August. For Chris Reynolds, I am Adam Sheets. Thank you for listening to the Pain and Panic Podcast.